So I'm gonna say my disclaimer is that Jackie and I go way back, ladies and gentlemen, and we've been playing the Burque scene and the Los Angeles scene for a long, long time together, and in different genres of music, but genres that were intermingling and that mixed, kind of like Jackie. I was talking to them a little bit, and that part of our readings for the week have been about characters like Mario Bausa, and how he met Dizzy Gillespie, and all of a sudden this fire was lit in New York City, you
Mhm.
know, and and um, and just talking about the fusion of what is Latino music, and the richness of it because of that fusion, you know.
Yeah.
And so we were just kind of throwing those ideas around before you jumped in. But before I turn it over to you, Jackie, I'd like to give you a proper introduction, if that's okay.
Of course, yes, sir.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jackie Zamora has become one of the most popular singers and entertainers in the American Southwest. And I'm just going to say before I continue on that, so even it's really cool because one of my favorite stations is KANW 89.1 New Mexico Music, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the locals. Those are the
Yeah.
locals, and 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 Jackie's even charting on KANW on the New Mexico, what they call the Spanish charts, which I love. I love that you're. To me, that's those are crossovers, because it's hard to break into that scene because people expect a certain sound. They expect those old rancheritas and corridos that they're used
Mhm.
to,
Mhm.
but you're breaking over with different stylings, and that means a lot. That means they're impressed. So I wanted to throw that out there first as well. She began studying music at the age of 13 with her mother Estela in her native home of Lima, Peru. After relocating to New Mexico, Jackie sang with the Western New Mexico University and University of New Mexico choral ensembles, but soon took a detour from choral performance to explore her love for Latin music. Jackie has been performing since 1999 with groups like Casablanca and Encanto, and is currently leading the award-winning popular local bands Calle 66 and Baracutanga, the Mighty. For the past 4 years, Jackie has been the only female Latin jazz singer invited to perform at the Blue Room inside the American Jazz Museum in Kansas City, along with Kansas City Latin Jazz All Stars during the yearly Women in Latin Jazz celebration. Man, that is so cool. By the way, I love that. That's a big deal. A perennial favorite among fans and musicians alike. Jackie is fluent in Spanish, Portuguese, and Inglés, making her the singer of choice for Latin music in Nuevo Mexico. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Miss Jackie Zamora.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. What a pleasure it is to be with you all this afternoon. Uh, it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to leave work early. I have a day job as well, and I thought this is a wonderful time to do this. As Keith mentioned, um, I have been performing for what seems like an eternity, and I'm still in my 40s, and I feel like there's so much more ground to still be covered in Latino music performance. I started my initial training was in zarzuela, which is Spanish musical theater, kind of with an influence in opera per se, but not too soon after I began uh, doing zarzuela in choral ensembles for university classes, I realized how much I felt like I was missing something. I was jumping into a genre that I felt like I could identify with. However, it turns out maybe I think I was missing my a true link between what I was doing and where I came from. Um, one must always know really the past before you can really entertain your future. And this is when I decided that I would start studying salsa. Um, Latin jazz came later, way later, but salsa was basically my first love. In Latin America and South America particularly, salsa music is basically kind of like pop per se. We yeah, we have Justin Bieber came to Peru. Uh, we've had all the major bands come to South America, but when it comes to like El Gran Combo coming, I remember Justin Bieber was in Lima the same night that El Gran Combo was there. There was like maybe 10,000 people for Justin Bieber and 100,000 for El Gran Combo. South America is salsero. And so that is the reason why I decided to get started with salsa music. I don't know if you know this, but going back into a little bit of a time frame, for example, for the history of salsa, salsa was born in New York City about 40s, 50s, and it's said to be the main influences came from Santiago de Cuba, which is eastern part of the island. um, some political tincture in there is that around the time when the Cuban musicians could no longer travel to the United States and Cuban recordings received no more playtime over the air. Puerto Rican musicians and what is called now New Yorican people, also is Puerto Rican descendants that live in New York. They took it upon themselves to continue to develop what the Cuban influence had already started in the 40s and 50s. Some of the legends that I think started the movement that made it so prominent were Celia Cruz, Willie Colon, Eddie Palmieri, gosh, Johnny Pacheco that we lost earlier this year. Um, let's see, Ruben Blades. I think you guys know him as Ruben Blades, but in Latin America it's Ruben Blades from Panama, and Hector Lavoe. I mean, figures that are so important to the development of salsa at the time. And New York basically was the hub for everything. Because if we look at the time frame, 40s and 50s, this is around the same time when Dizzy Gillespie took notice, a great Dizzy Gillespie, the great jazz performer, took notice of Latin rhythms and invited a percussionist, Chano Pozo, to play with him in his band. He was the very first Cuban conga player ever to be in the same bandstand with the jazz band. And so this is basically what gave creation to Latin jazz, um, to incorporate percussion, Latino percussion, into jazz music. Can you imagine just living in New York City around the 40s and 50s, being in the birth of all this greatness going on? Shortly after, salsa music, of course, was in every club. Salsa dancing was the inevitable step. After New York gave birth to these wonderful rhythms, they basically traveled all over Latin America. My memory fails me of when and I can tell you right now, when bossa nova in Brazil, and actually 60s, in the 60s, Brazil in South America gets its first taste of the basically the merge of samba rhythm, which is a traditional Afro-Brazilian rhythm, when it's mixed with jazz, creates a new rhythm, a whole new wave of music called bossa nova, and and therefore created kind of it's a transplant of Latin music. Yes, Latin jazz begins as Cuban percussion incorporated into jazz music, and in South America, bossa nova, which means the new thing in Portuguese, becomes the Latin jazz version of South America. I find that really a really interesting fact that Latino music, if you see all the different ways that how it becomes no longer jazz, no longer just salsa, it becomes Latin jazz. It's because the Latino influence is so strong in every culture. Art is completely immersed in different aspects where Latino influence has laid new roots. It's become a new thing for not just for visual arts, it's for music and dance. It's incorporating everything that it's involving everything that it can, because I think the Latino influence is so infectious, right? And not just in music and art or food or traditions. So I began studying Latin jazz. I began studying salsa, mostly salsa, and I started performing with salsa bands in here in Albuquerque when, I don't know, you guys are probably too young. Maybe Keith remembers. Casablanca and Son Como Son were the two main bands performing at the Cooperage. The Cooperage is a restaurant that just closed due to the pandemic, that damn darn pandemic that can't believe put a lot of really great businesses out of business. And one of those was a cultural icon here in our city, which is the Cooperage restaurant. It was basically La Casa de la Salsa for Albuquerque for decades. And I mean at least 30 years. And, and so when I began studying salsa, I started to frequent the Cooperage, where you could see Casablanca, which mainly performed Puerto Rican style salsa, and then you could also see Son Como Son on the Saturday nights. Thursday for the Puerto Rican, Saturday for the Cuban salsa, and that's Son Como Son for those of you who are in New Mexico and involved in the music scene. Son Como Son is our premier Cuban band here in Albuquerque, and it's just, we're so lucky to have them. And I started to understand how they're just islands with a little bit of miles in between them, with so much difference, so much. Se dan la mano. They stretch hands, and they're so different and so colorful at the same time. Uh, Cuban salsa has given us not just regular son and guaracha and montuno, is also giving us now what we know as timba cubana, something that is specifically, you can always identify it by the rhythm of the piano, which is completely different than regular montuno piano. But those, for you musicians out there, you would really appreciate that. Um, so after I continued my studies in salsa and Latin jazz. Um, at the same time, I was studying Portuguese. Actually, all my family speaks Portuguese. In South America, it's typical that everyone has some exposure to Portuguese because there are neighbors. Um, but it wasn't until I started studying Brazilian music that it made sense to me that I would like to be able to understand what I'm singing, that I studied Portuguese. UNM has a fantastic Portuguese program, highly recommend. And my my family said, well, what about South American music? Do you have any interest in South American music? And of course, South America has given us so much in music. If you take a moment to listen to, for example, cumbias, we all identify cumbias. Who doesn't know how to dance cumbia? If you can walk, you're already dancing cumbias, right? So cumbias originally came from Colombia, and it's an Afro Latino rhythm that its birthplace is, there's a there's controversy as to the birthplace, so the city, but I will tell you that it is in Colombia, but it is based of African rhythms. And anyone that understands Latino music will tell you that the mother that what gave birth to all the Latino rhythms is Africa, and I will have to concur with that. Um, and not just cumbia in Colombia. Peru, for example, the birthplace of Peru, my birthplace, gave us huayno, festejos, which are Afro-Peruvian rhythms. Again, the great influence of African music and rhythms in Peruvian music is so impressive. I'm always so in awe of all beautiful influences of Africa in Peruvian music. It gave us festejo, landó, panalivio, marinera. My God, Peru alone has such a large, diverse pool of rhythms that came Africa influenced. If we go to Argentina, Argentina had more of the European, because they were a colony of Britain, so they had more of a European um, influence, and yet they have a lot of Andean influence as well, mostly in northern Argentina. But Argentina is mostly known for tangos and tango and the bandoneon, which is a small accordion. It's some of the most beautiful melodic. You just time travel when you hear the bandoneon playing tangos. In Chile, we have cuecas, beautiful cuecas, which is kind of a cousin to the marinera in Peru, and it is a couples dance. It's almost like a mating dance to see if your partner is worthy of you, depending on how well they're dancing. And the beautiful figures that are done in figure eight, they dance in an eight figure, and then there's their dancing with a handkerchief. It's absolutely stunning. So, getting to know my roots, I think, is what really defined at some point where I wanted to go forward in music. This was, I want to say, about 15 years ago that I really decided it was time to do a really deep search of rhythms and study music in a way that would help me understand where I was going to go from this point on, um, to discover music and to discover my own voice, cultural voice. Now coming to present time, about 10 years, I founded the band Baracutanga. I don't know if you know the band, it's a local band. And with that band, I've been able to travel quite a bit and explore South American rhythms because we emphasize in South American rhythms. Some of the members have been, we had one from Argentina, he left, he moved back, but we have two guys from Ecuador and one guy from Bolivia, and a percussionist who has traveled all over the world. He plays like seven instruments. Nick Baker, such a wonderful, wonderful percussionist, and and that has given us so many depths into exploring our roots and being able to move forward into our musical journey. I think music is not just a tool; it's a vehicle. You move. Your life is going to be in constant movement, and art will is basically the vehicle in which you're traveling in. And that's one of the things that I have enjoyed the most about doing art, doing music, because you have a power to write lyrics that conveys a message, and you have tremendous responsibility to make that message special, or you can make it about absolutely nothing. If your melody is so wonderful and you're just going to dance, that's also your message. And in music and in art and in exploring roots, there's unity. I have always admired that about my fellow musicians.
And
um,
I was gonna say kind of like Oye como va, right? I mean, there are very few lyrics in that one, but all you need to hear is Tito Puente hitting those
Oh my God, you can say that
timbales.
again. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was a vehicle for Tito Puente, and it was. I can't tell you. You don't really need much to say when the music is right, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. Absolutely. What band hasn't covered Oye Como Va, right?
Santana.
That's right. That's right. And you know what? Not I wasn't always in bands that were very popular or were of name per se. I was in bands that were trying to also understand where they were going, and I was also in bands that were so much fun, so much fun. And I have to say that is about that time when I met your professor here, Mr. Keith Sanchez, in one of those really fun bands that I was in, Concerto Tambor, w- way back in the day. And you really get to you really get to explore with bands like Concepto Tambor. You get to explore the, you know, the percussive part of it all. This is a Concepto Tambor was a band that didn't have any melodic instruments, nothing but drums, and each drum is tuned differently. So therefore, it almost like creates a very subtle melody, and it was a time of definitely a time of exploration for a musician to be able to just not hear melodic instruments and be able to focus on the rhythmic portion. And the Concepto Tambor was following in the footsteps of a really great band at the time that was, to me, that I consider to be still a band that resonates with a lot of musicians of my time period, and it is Stoic Frame. And it is, do they know that you were in Stoic Frame?
No, no.
Okay,
I don't
sorry,
talk about it very
we don't
much.
talk about it. So
But I'm
there's
going
a
to at
band.
the end of the class because we're gonna get into Latino rock, you
Ooh,
know, and punk and stuff. So then we'll talk about that.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I then I won't spoil anything for you guys, but yeah.
That's okay.
But if
I
we were, yeah,
appreciate you
this is
mentioning
good.
it.
That was a really excellent time in my musical career where I really looked up to the musicians of that time, because I was understanding that even though for me my only love, my only vision was salsa, I heard this band, Stoic Frame, play Lluvia one time, which is an Eddie Santiago song. And it just changed everything for me, because I realized, wait a minute, why is this rocker guy singing my favorite salsa song? And then it made me realize quickly, because it blew my mind. I thought, no, he's crossing into my neighborhood. I don't do that to him. Why is he dancing on my side of the street? And the truth is that, when we perform music of other genres as musicians, we're not doing it necessarily to step into your shoes. We're doing it to show respect, to show honor of that we enjoy your music, and therefore, please allow me to interpret it the way I hear it, because it's music is for everyone, right? And in Latino music, it's got that sense of inclusion, of, man, get up, we're all gonna dance, you're gonna dance, call your sister, call your tia, this is on, and we're gonna dance. And so that was a turning point for me at the time, because I never thought that something like that would happen. That, I want you to know, that night really influenced a lot of other nights of music, where I grabbed some rock en español song, and I put it into a cumbia, because I thought, well, if he can do it, so can I. That was a turning point. That was definitely a
Well,
turning point.
well, I love it, and I feel like, and even before, right at the beginning of class, I was talking a little bit about, I mentioned, Mario Bausa, and how he fell in love with jazz, you know, and began to play it, and there was a little bit of friction, and because we make these attempts because that's not our specialty. You specialize, uh, but I think it's in those moments, and you're clumsy at it. I was clumsy at playing Julia. I didn't play it like, at Santiago, or Santiago's band, but it's that melding, that like you're discussing, that mixture, and that courage. I think it's that courage to just say, I'm going to do it because I love it, and I'm going to try it. And I think that's what all these musicians were doing, and they were doing that in New York,
Yeah.
and that's why we ended up with this. But like you're saying, in Peru, you think about people, or the Afro-Peruano to the Afro-Cubano, Panameño, you name it, Afro-Mexicano, you name it, it's
Yeah.
all there. But they were people who shared, generally they were the people without, they didn't have the money, they didn't have, they were the workers, they were
Yeah.
the laborers, and so they came together and they made instruments out of whatever they could find. And i
Absolutely.
think i think that's what it is, that sharing, you know.
Yes. Yes. And
So
that, in bringing that up, Keith, in Peru, for example, if you've ever, I don't know if you've, for those of you who have seen different percussion instruments, we have the cajon. So the cajon is a wooden box. It is used in Latino music. Is It was introduced to flamenco by Paco de Lucia. Um, the difference between Afro-Peruvian cajon and and flamenco cajon is that it has a snare to give it that a little bit of a vibrato per se. Um, but the Afro-Peruvian cajon is a dry sound, and even though it's just a box of what seems to be very simple assembly, was originally made by the slaves in Peru during the time of slavery still, in utilizing wood from ships that were transporting other slaves into Peru. They simply, in the haciendas, um, they were allowed to either do their own worship or their own tradition of dance, as long as it was not in front of the patrones. It had to be done kind of like an underground thing. And so they built this the percussion box, which is now called cajon, and almost like a rectangular shape, and it has a hole in the back, which is where the echo comes out. And cajon, basically, what it did is it created a rhythm for Afro-Peruvians to be able to practice, to be able to praise, to be able to work. It became almost like a heartbeat for them, and it is related now to a lot of different rhythms in Afro-Peruvian music. It didn't stay with just one rhythm. It transpired to so many. And what it does now, not just Afro-Peruvians perform it. Uh, if you can play percussion, now everyone is encouraged to learn how to play cajon, because it's so complex, but it unifies a band. It just adds so much color and rhythm and in history. It adds such rich history to the music that you're playing. In Baracutanga, we started using it. Thank you. We started using it quickly after I joined the band, because I sing Afro-Peruvian music, and boy, this cajon is the heartbeat. It is an absolute heartbeat. It is beautiful. In San Francisco, there's a cajon festival because there's such a large presence of Peruvians and musicians in San Francisco. Thank you. And one of the things of cumbia, I remember, because I host every year the South American Folk Fair. When the Cuban dancers come out, they tell you, "Do you know why the step is the way it is?" And sorry, I'm gonna dance for you. Please don't hold it against me. So they're coming out with their polleras, and it's a dance, and I'm gonna bring this down a little bit so you could see. And so they're sliding their feet like this, like this. And the reason for that is the women had chains on their ankles, so they weren't able to move very much. So this is about the same distance as the chain would allow them to take a step for. And that is the birth of the step of cumbia. And they're holding candles in their hand because they danced at night. So with their chains and their candles in their hand and their polleras, which are their skirts, they're moving and sliding across the dance floor. Um, just stories like that. There's so many um, of how it all began, of music and dance. And even though the story behind the cumbia dance is sad, it is now celebrated. It is celebrated because it celebrates the perseverance of mankind to be able to emerge from something that was unpleasant, something that could have caused a lot more harm, even though it created a lot of negative waves. I think it's also a celebration of life. In Latin America does that very well. It celebrates it. It celebrates every point of positive from the negative. We're trying to close a door of the negative to bring something positive. Anywhere from music that was even the born out of the time of dictatorship, like it was in Chile and like how it was in Brazil. We try to take that negative and turn it into a positive. Like in Brazil, for example, the birth of it's called BMP, um, MBP, Música Brasileira Popular, and it is based on the time of censorship when they weren't allowed to speak their mind because anyone that opposed the government or denounced the violence of the government, they could be disappeared like it was in Chile. But even though the music was with hidden message, it was some of the most beautiful music that remains till this day. Victor Jara, who was a victim of the dictatorship of Pinochet, he wrote some of the most memorable music in Latin America. Victor Jara, great influence. If you've never heard his music, I really encourage you and look for the translation of the lyrics. It's very, there's a lot of hope behind everything that he's saying. It's a wonderful message. And that kind of ties back again to at the beginning when I was saying, as musicians, we have a great responsibility to have a message in the music, in the melody, in the rhythm, and in your lyrics. Because what you say in your music, the message that you're sharing, it can have a great impact. And it doesn't even matter what rhythm it is. It doesn't matter what roots you're taking from it. What matters is that you do it respectfully. I wasn't born in a Caribbean country where salsa is, you're fed salsa all the time. No, in Peru is Andean music. I am native. Everyone in Peru is native. Those that tell you that they're not, they're lying to you. We're all native because of the mestizaje, you know. So salsa was not a rhythm that a lot of Peruvians were born practicing. So I had to really do my studying. I had to put in the work and pay my dues to be kind of allowed in the circle. um, Kind of how when Keith mentioned that I was also performing New Mexico music, it took me a long time to get some acceptance also into New Mexico music. Once they realized it was done respectfully and with the guidance of other New Mexico musicians, because that's sometimes is the best way to go forward is with the hand of folks who have done this in the past. So, what do you think?
I I I, I was gonna say along those lines. I love that you brought forward, because I think in this class, I think it's our themes lie in this in the not just the historical roots, but the spirit behind the music and the reason. And as you mentioned that, I spent a lot of my youth in El Salvador, Central America, uh, during the Civil War. And when you talked about making something positive from something negative, I witnessed uh, those same scenarios amongst the people. on all levels. In the buses, they'd get up and dance to cumbia, and the on the on and in the buses while they were moving, maybe not so safe, but definitely joyful, and that was in the midst of guerrilla civil.
Wow.
um, and even and mentioning, and music still was that thing. And I think in Latin America as in anywhere else, music is that one guiding force, and it transcends borders. And I saw that, there were times, everybody, when I was I was just honing my chops as a musician. I was just learning my first chords, and I was playing with another compadre of ours, Matias Pizarro, and his mother was the head of UNICEF in San Salvador at the time. And so that's why we were all there together. That's how we started this little spark of music. And I'll keep it short, but we were playing in a little band, and suddenly, the the guerrilla would come out of the hills, out of the bosque, out of the jungles, and descend onto the city. And suddenly, you know
Oh
the
my gosh.
would start. So we jump under the tables and wait. And then when it dissipated and the skirmish stopped, there was that you would see, all it would be filled, all you could smell was gunpowder. But everyone would get back up and grab a beer, and the band would take the stage, you
Yeah,
know. So the music never was always that that force that made people strive and move forward and survive, you
yeah,
know. So,
absolutely.
you know,
It's a survival mechanism, I think. Art in any form, art is what's carried us even through this pandemic. To be able to have access to art within ourselves, within our homes. At least we still have internet. We're able to play music. I know we haven't been able to see each other face to face, to do a performance, to do a gig. That has been the hardest part because music, when you work at it, it is part of your economy to perform music, to do music. And that has been somewhat of a challenge as well. But mostly that connection that you feel when you're performing, and knowing that you're pouring your soul, you're pouring your feelings, you're pouring history, the history of everything you've ever done up to that point, to your audience, is a powerful feeling. I've been to concerts where I'm singing something. I have a tendency to close my eyes because I'm very nervous, but when I open my eyes and I see somebody singing along with what I'm singing, it makes me realize that person probably had a difficult day, or maybe had a difficult time with something, and singing those lyrics with me right now is probably bringing some sort of healing to that person. And music will do that, will continue to do that, despite this pandemic or anything else that hits humanity. I believe music has that very important transformative power, where it's going to take us, it's a vehicle, and it's going to continue to carry us into what is next for all of us. I know it's evolving. I know we're relying more and more on electronic music. This is what the younger generation likes. But it is also up to us to continue to keep those traditions of where the history of music has started. Um, I know, for example, my kids, they enjoy some of the music on the radio, but I say, okay, no problem. But you're gonna also get to listen to all the greats in jazz, and you're gonna listen to all the classicals and salsa, even though they sound very, you can't make out what they're saying. It doesn't matter. Yes, you're gonna learn how to play an instrument, because this isn't necessarily music that was created without an instrument. And so in order for you to make even beats, this was all influenced. influenced by real instruments. So everybody gets an instrument in my house.
You got a hand up there from Isabel. She liked that.
Thank you.
um, so I was gonna just say, I think, you know, we're coming close to a close, but I'm wondering, Jackie, if you know there, and speaking, because you mentioned the lyrics, the importance, and almost that obligatory element of bringing something special to the table with your music, something special to people. And I feel like there's a Barakutanga song and there was a video, and it's a powerful, poignant, important song. I'm wondering if you have that video to cue. Would you mind cueing
Um,
that for us?
yeah. Which one? Is it Cuida tus espaldas, the one that talks
Y
about?
Cuida tus espaldas.
Yes.
Esa
Okay,
mera.
of course. Yeah. We wrote this song. I wrote the lyrics for this song um, even before ICE was a thing where it was, well, we knew ICE was happening, but people weren't denouncing it as much as they were at the time. Um, and I remember thinking to myself, what if that were me? What if I were coming home from work and I don't make it all the way home because I am detained, because I don't have papers, but I am a tax-paying citizen. You know, maybe I'm a dreamer. If I am a DACA recipient, what if I'm not allowed to go home to be reunited with my children? So families are separated, not just at the border, but inside this country. People are separated, families are separated, and I have kids, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to not be able to come home to them, for them to experience that fear. And so, as a band, we decided to write this song, and it talks about, you know, the importance of keeping lives, families together for a good life, for quality of life. It's not supposed to have any kind of political hidden message or anything. It's just focused on families. So I will share my screen and I will play this video for you.
Ellos ya se alistan, juran que esta noche te van a atrapar. Ya ha pasado el tiempo en ese sucio juego, puede que la suerte esté en tu favor. Noche tras noche siguen tras de ti, hoy día te salvas, mañana no sé. Todos van cayendo. Por eso te digo, deja de buscarla, baja la cabeza, no mires atrás. Das un paso en falso y ellos al acecho, es solo tu cuerpo, tu alma jamás. Noche tras noche siguen tras de ti, hoy día te salvas, mañana no sé. Todos van cayendo. Cuida tus espaldas. te ubica, te pone presión. Si piensas bien y destruye sueños, se cae el juego y te lleva preso. Cuida tus espaldas, si ella te ubica, te pone presión. Si piensas bien y destruye sueños, se cae el juego y te lleva preso. Tus espaldas, si ella te ubica, te pone presión. Si tiene bien y destruye sueños, se cae el juego y te lleva preso. Cuida tus espaldas, si ella te ubica, te pone presión. Si tiene bien y destruye sueños, se cae el juego y te lleva preso.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás, amigo? ¿Muy bien? Papá, perdón. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás?
I love that.
Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Just the rhythm, everything. Las letras, todo. Wow.
Muchas
Giving
gracias.
all kinds of hands up. All right. Bueno, pues ya son las 5. Les voy a dejar que se vayan todos. And Jackie, thank you so much for being here with us today. It really means a lot that you take time. I know you're busy, you know, full-time working, full-time mother, full-time musician. I mean, wow, you know, I mean, you're an inspiration to us. So thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
being here.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. It was wonderful seeing you all, meeting you all, and best of luck